The summer after I graduated high school, my mom helped me get a part-time job at a little diner about 4 miles from our house. The pay was a whole lot, and I was putting away almost everything I could in the hopes of buying a second-hand car before the end of the summer. I didn't spend a single cent unless it was necessary, but since my shifts tended to end pretty late, it put me in an awkward position. Spend a chunk of wages on cab fare, which was going to be way higher at that time of night, or I could jog home. Now, I wasn't very athletic at this point, but the need to save money made it a real convenient time to start. So I pulled out some old sports gear, brought them to work with me, then started running home 2 or 3 times a week. It really sucked at first, and a few times in the early days I threw in the towel and took a cab home. But after a while, as it got easier, I started getting a buzz of how much more stamina I was getting. It got to the point where I'd time my runs on my Casio stopwatch, and sometimes I'd make a game of trying to run the fastest time I could. Part of my route involved cutting through the middle of this big piece of parkland, and I mean right down the middle too, and the first few times, running through there at night was just really creepy. It got less scary as time went by, as the place was mostly deserted by that time, and it wasn't in any gang territory or anything, but even so, I'd take out one of my headphones before running through just to be safe. Then one night, right as I was getting pretty comfortable running through the park, I heard something that turned my blood to ice. I'm about a third of the way through and I hear this ear-splitting, blood-curdling scream coming from somewhere in the darkness. Because I'd taken out only my right headphone and the sound was coming from my left side, at first I couldn't tell where it was coming from, and that made it all the more frightening. I stopped in my tracks, pulled the other headphone out, then just stood there under the streetlight, extremely freaked out. I remember kind of pulling myself together and telling myself that it was probably just a fox or something, because they make incredibly creepy wails at night sometimes, I'm sure you know. But then right as I start to think about starting up jogging again, I hear the same scream, only this time I can pinpoint where it's coming from. If I'm honest, my gut feeling was telling me to just keep running, because whatever the reason that scream was, it had to be really bad. But at the same time, I knew it was pretty much down to me to do something about it. It really did feel like fate had singled me out to be like, are you a piece of crap, or are you not a piece of crap? And as scared as I was, I chose not to be a piece of crap. I walked off the lit path into the dark, straining my eyes to see where I was going at first. Being under the streetlights had totally ruined any natural night vision that I'd had, so when the next big scream came, it was so close that I swear that I almost peed my pants. But by that point, I could actually hear that the scream was coming from someone really young, and before long, I spotted a kid just sitting under a tree, completely in the dark, just like breathlessly crying before wailing every so often. If I had to guess, I'd say that they were maybe 9 or 10 years old, definitely still around elementary school age for sure. I was actually worried about scaring the kid, but he barely reacted at all when I finally asked him where his mom and dad were. He just looked at me, still in tears, and made some gestures that I couldn't figure out. All I could do was just try my best to calm him down and hope that he wasn't seriously hurt in some way. If he was, he sure as heck wasn't telling me about it, and again, I didn't want to have blood on my hands because I didn't get the kid help in time or something. I kept trying to check him for blood, and was relieved when I couldn't see anything, but that didn't mean that he didn't have like a burst appendix or something. You see where I'm going with this, internal injuries and whatnot. When I finally get the kid to the point where he can talk to me, I try to break the parent's question down into 2 parts, seeing if the words mom or dad elicit a better response than just parents. I ask him super slowly, "Where is your dad?" The kid just shrugs and says, "I don't know where my dad is." And then I ask him where his mom is real slow, and get this. He says, before totally breaking down into tears again, "I don't have a mom anymore." No, in the moment there was a part of me that thought maybe it was all just some childhood antics. The kid and the mom had a fight, the kid declared that he was running away, like a lot of kids do at some point, and then he gotten lost and scared in a dark, creepy park. I started telling him, "Sure you do, buddy. We just need to get you back home so we can sort this whole thing out." He starts shaking his head like, "No, no, no, no," then breaks into tears again. So I have to work at calming him down all over again. Finally, I get him to a state where I can ask him if he knows where he lives at, and the kid says yeah, he does. I then ask him to show me, and after a little convincing, he gets up, takes my hand, and then starts leading me off towards where he lives. The first sign that I realized something was really wrong was when the kid basically led me across the street to his house. He wasn't lost, and when we got closer to what he claimed was his front door, I saw it was wide open. Right away I'm thinking, uh-oh, because this isn't exactly like taking the kid to the front desk at a supermarket. I have no idea what had happened in that house, and I know that the door being open at like 2 a.m. was definitely not a good sign. First thing I do is walk the kid away from the house into a neighbor's place. I was worried that this might freak the kid out more, but he didn't freak out. He just kept on sniffling, probably just in shock at that stage. And this is right after my parents bought me a cell phone too, mainly for emergencies, so as I'm hammering away at the neighbor's door, I'm also calling 911 to let them know that I thought something really bad had just happened to this poor kid. The neighbor had opened the door, armed by the way, and he had heard the whole exchange with the dispatcher. They got the kid into their house, then totally against what the dispatcher had told me, which was to stay away from the kid's house if there was a suspected violence situation going on, the neighbor comes back out, strapped up, and runs over to the kid's house. I'm telling the guy to stop, knowing that if the cops just show up while he's still inside, he could end up getting shot. He just told me to tell them that he was inside if they showed up. Like the cops don't just shoot first and ask questions later if someone has a weapon, and then just went ahead and crept inside, gun drawn, like he was friggin' John Wick or something. I don't know if I was expecting to hear shots or screams or whatever, but like a minute later, the guy came out again, eyes all wide, saying, "We got 2 bodies in there," and making comments about how bad it was inside. And that's when I realized that when the kid said, "I don't have a mommy anymore," he really meant it. I think he'd actually witnessed whatever had just happened, but was just too messed up to actually say it. After a while, the cops showed up. I told them what I knew. Then my part was all played out. They were more interested in talking to the neighbor who had gone into the house, just so they could get an idea of the layout. All they did with me was take my name, address, and phone number, just in case they needed to talk to me, as I guess they had what they needed right in front of them. I finished my journey back home, half running, half walking, in a state of shock. That when I got home, I was completely exhausted, but I couldn't manage to drift off until almost dawn. The adrenaline was bad enough, but when I was wondering what was going to happen to that kid, that got my mind racing over and over. I remember hearing about it on the news later, but it wasn't like I was calling around to all my friends to be like, "Yo, that was me they were talking about." People found out one way or another, but for a while back then, I just didn't want to think about it. It's been years now, and the kid must be nearing the age I was when I found him that night. I hope that he's moved past what happened and managed to make a life for himself somehow. But if that kid really did witness his mama getting shot by her boyfriend, all before he turned the gun on himself, then I don't know if there's a kid alive who would come back from seeing something like that. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.